everyone. You are listening to the Rachael Maves Podcast, and I'm Rachael Maves, your host. This podcast is part of the lead up to the upcoming Measure What We Value Summit, scheduled for February 5th through 6th, 2025 in Fresno, California. The summit emphasizes honoring and amplifying student voices, fostering inclusive classrooms, and equipping educators with tools for impactful change. You can find more information at parsecsummit.com. Today we are talking to Anika Yu. Anika is a first-year UC Berkeley student studying political economy on a pre-law track. She is passionate about using law and policy to support marginalized communities. As the 2023-2024 student board member for Dublin Unified School District, she advocated for fair policies on grading, menstrual equity, and student compensation. Anika values collective action and work to make student voices central to district decisions, highlighting the connection between belonging and achievement. Anika, thank you for joining me today. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation with you as well.
So one of the ways that we start out the podcast is always with the opportunity just to tell your story and share a little bit about yourself. So I'd love to just hear about your path, how you ended up at Berkeley and in the major that you're doing. And in the midst of that, what really fills your bucket and brings you joy?
Okay, so I think my biggest defining moment of when I knew I wanted to pursue a politics related major was in freshman year. Everyone was on lockdown, and honestly during that time I was on social media a lot, and just seeing all the racial violence, kind of the political turmoil in the country at the time with the Black Lives Matter movement and the Stop Asian Hate movement going on. Just it was like my political awakening in a way, where I realized that politics actually does matter in people's everyday lives, and it's not just what you see on television, on the news. So kind of coming out of quarantine, I knew that I wanted to be involved in politics in some way and make some change in my community. But while quarantine gave me that realization, um it also, because I was home alone, kind of, I guess, decreased my confidence in interacting with others. So I had this conviction that I had to do something, but I didn't know how to do anything. So the student board member before me, she was really instrumental in making the position more well known in our district. So when I was a senior and she graduated from the position, kind of that was when there was an opening in the position, and I knew that I had to run for the student board member position. So before my senior year, I guess I had just been quietly observing kind of the issues in my district, and some of the problems that I wanted to fix. But once it came time, it was senior year, I was like, okay, I've been quietly observing for the past 3 years. I think I have what it takes to do this position. I just ran for the position. And yeah, the last year was really fun because finally this thing that I had wanted to do for so many years, for 3 years, um, all the all the things I wanted to do ended up coming to fruition, and I could make the changes that I wanted to see. And what brings me joy besides policy related things and advocacy is recently, I've been really into making food for myself. So I really like cooking and baking, and then sharing it with other people because I like it when they tell me, "Oh, this tastes really good." Thank
Love that. So what are your favorite things to cook and bake?
I really like noodles. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like experimenting with different noodle shapes. There's pasta, there's Chinese style noodles, there's
Yeah.
Japanese style, and different sauces. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that sounds my mouth's watering just that sounds delicious. And what about desserts? Is that when you say baking, is it desserts? Is it breads? What is it that you're baking?
Oh my, I so in quarantine I had a bread baking phase like many people did, I think. But I think cookies are easier on a time crunch. So every Christmas, I've been doing it for 2 years now, but I've been making a Christmas cookie box to share with people. And there's 4 or 5 different kinds of cookies.
Yum. That's wonderful. I love that that's the thing that brings you joy. That's pretty amazing, Anika, just how you got interested in politics and wanting to be involved. And making change and that it was something that came out of the pandemic. It's almost like a silver lining of
Yeah, it is.
victory. Yeah, absolutely. And what a powerful like story to be able to hold to that. That is something that was challenging that led to a really positive outcome. Absolutely. And I assume for that year that you were in school and online, how was that for you? Just what was your experience, the good, the good, the bad, the ugly of it?
Honestly, I was really fortunate in that it was my first year of high school, and most of the classes I took were pretty introductory classes. So I didn't really feel like I was missing out on too much just during the school year. It did get like pretty boring at times where everyone would just turn off their camera. But
Yeah.
the harder part was like when it came time for sophomore year, I still felt like a freshman. And as a sophomore, I felt like I was falling behind because I don't know, people were getting involved in all these different things. But since missed my freshman year, and I just felt like I couldn't get connected to the community in a way. But I just realized that, it's easier to get started than to overthink it too much. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and what a way to do it by being part of the student board representative. That's amazing. Good for you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, what motivated you to get involved with the National Student Board Member Association, and how has that shaped your perspective now on education? Because that is a much larger national community that student board members can plug into. So, what was the impetus there that drove that connection, and how has that helped shape or change your view?
Yeah, so the like I mentioned before, the student board member that did my job before me in my district, she knew some of the founding members of the National Student Board Member Association, so she kind of referred me to like, oh, they're starting up as an organization. You should take a look if you're interested. And then I joined their first student trustee. I think there is their start conference. I'm so sorry, like I'm blanking on the exact like acronym meaning right now, which I shouldn't. I should know it. But I think it's student trustee action and readiness training conference, the START conference. Um, and going to the START conference gave me a lot. Honestly, it taught me like basically everything I needed for my student board member term. So it taught me how to write different resolutions. It taught me how to kind of like the school district budget and interact with adult school board members. So after going to that training, I was like, I wanted to be involved in this organization so I could reach more student board members and get them to all know like how important like what are these important things that they need to know for being an effective school board member. So that really motivated me to go through the process of applying for their executive council. I think look being on the National Student Board Member Association definitely opened up my view to more education policy across the country because we research policies in different states like Nevada, Virginia, Texas, and it's shaped my perspective on education because like in the United States, education is very like up to the different states. So without being an NSBMA, I would never have known like, oh, in Texas, they're not allowed to have student board members unless the district is majorly failing. Or in Massachusetts, sometimes districts are required to have student board members. So these things are I'm just like really appreciative that I get to work with an organization that's like a national organization, and learn about these things.
Yeah, that's great. And I would assume too, being able to just connect with other board members about the things that they're excited about and the policies that they're working on and the shifts and patterns that you see across the nation. Like I would love to hear if there's anything that really stood out from you to you that you learned from others.
Yeah, I think let me take a moment to think about that.
Yeah.
But um oh, so like one of my fellow members on the executive council last year. Or actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I learned something from like each one of them because we were so different. Like, I'm from a pretty small district for California standards. because I had like 12,000 students in my district, but there were people on the executive council that had like 120,000 students in their district, or like 70,000. So I learned a lot about like how they communicated with students, because they had a bigger district and they had definitely more people to reach. So some of like the executive council members, they had like really big like student advisory councils,
Oh, sure.
and one of them was like focused on STEM in her district, which is really cool because I'm not a very big like STEM person, or not as knowledgeable about STEM. So, and then one of our executive board members was the state student board member of his entire state, the entire state of Nevada. So just seeing how they applied different like strategies to their different like the needs of their different student populations was really interesting.
I love that. That's a great example, too, of ways that you guys can collaborate and learn from one another, some of the best practices. How do you think hearing from students like you at the summit will help shape future decisions in education?
hmm I'm definitely a really big believer in like grassroots change in education, because I feel like it just all starts from the classroom. And I think what better way to change your classroom than to hear from students, because students are really the ones going through the policies enacted by school boards every single day. Um, and I think that hearing from students is not always a guarantee, but it should be a necessity, because they are the what we always say at the National Student Board Member Association is that students are like 100% of the most important constituency of a school board, but they're often 0% of the decision-making power. So, like we at NSBMA, we definitely try to change that. I think hearing from students might help some education leaders realize, oh, this is the thing I had been missing. Like, this is the component that I hadn't been understanding in my classrooms, or this is a completely new perspective that I would never have heard if a student hadn't come and told me this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's so funny to me because we do that in so many other things. Like when you think about research and design, you're always starting with the end user, right? And you're getting their feedback as you're developing and iterating. And it's the same in education. The end user really is the student. And being able to include them, they're just going to have a whole different lens and thought on the way in which we're approaching issues, problems, policies, system structures, ways to improve. That it's great that you've been so like a vital part of that conversation. What do you think is one way you've grown or changed through your work with the National Student Board Member Association?
I think that I definitely learned how to organize events, because throughout the year we did a bunch of were ideating, and we like had a bunch of ideas for events in our heads. But then when we started, there weren't that many signups. So then over the year we incorporated like different strategies, like advertising via Discord, or having a raffle at the end of an event so that participants could enter the gift card raffle. So that's one thing, helping like learning how to help engagement for events. And I also think that National Student Board Member Association really gave me like really gave me like an like national stage, I guess, for my work done in my local school district. So, at the end of my executive council term last school year, I went to Washington D.C. I had the opportunity to speak at a conference called Educators Rising for Future
Mhm.
Educators, and at like the session that I presented, I just basically summarized my entire term as a student board member in my district, and it was really encouraging to be able to get nice feedback about the work that I did, and hear students say that they were inspired to start a student board member position, in their districts too, or campaign for one, or just run for it. So having being able to reach more people with my story about being a student board member, definitely is really a gratifying experience.
That's fantastic. So this is our last question, Annika, and then we'll wrap up. But I'd love to hear what's the one thing you're most proud of as the student leader?
I'm really Throughout my entire term, I felt that I was the most proud when I was able to lend some decision-making power to other students. So while I did advocate and write for different policies by myself, throughout my term, I also introduced other students to the resolution process in our district. So I helped a student introduce an AI use resolution to our school board, and another student introduce a zero waste to landfill resolution to our school board, and they both passed. And when it passed, I just could tell that they were so happy, and I was so happy that, their ideas had gone from just their idea to a resolution that was passed by the school board. And I just think that it's good. The student board member is important because the student board member is like the bridging the gap between the school board and the student population, and explaining some of the jargon or some of the bureaucratic stuff that often doesn't get explained to students.
Yes.
And then I just think that sharing the power amongst all students is the most important, because it can be a really lonely, isolating position sometimes as a student board member, where you're like the only one in the district that's kind of in between the adult decision-making side and then the student stakeholder side. So sharing the power is something that I think every student board member should do.
That's a mark of a very good leader, Anika. That it's not something, and to have that perspective, and as a high schooler at that time, that it's not just you holding that. How can you empower other students to be involved and to get engaged? And I mean, that's really powerful. I'm excited to see where you go and how you bring this to a national stage one day and start setting our policies for education.
That is definitely the dream. I'm gonna work hard towards it.
Yeah, well, we'll have to keep an eye on you and watch. I'm excited to see where you go. Well, thank you, Anika, for your time today. I'm so grateful that you're willing to have this conversation, and I cannot wait to meet you at the summit.
Of course. Thank you so much. See you at the summit.
Parsec Education is hosting the Measure What We Value Summit on February 5th through 6th in Fresno, California. Join us for impactful conversations on empathy, engagement, hard truths, and more, alongside leaders like Shaka Booker, Rich Stowell, Jamila Lescott, Pepper Miller, and student speakers like Timmy Alori and Anika Yu. We have a promo for 25% off all summit tickets until January 31st. Seats are filling up fast, so make sure to secure your spot today. Get your tickets at parsecsummit.com.